stained and dog-eared papers, every one of them in Ned Kelly's distinctive hand, were transported to Melbourne inside a metal trunk. Undated, unsigned, handwritten account in the collection of the Melbourne Public Library, VL 10453. Parcel 1. His life until the age of 12. National Bank letterhead, almost certainly taken from the Euroa branch of the National Bank in December 1878. There are 45 sheets of medium stock, 8 by 10 inches approximately, with stab holes near the top, where at one time they were crudely bound. Heavily soiled. Contains accounts of his early relations with police, including an accusation of transvestism. Some recollections of the Quinn family and the move to the township of Avenel. A claim that his father was wrongly arrested for the theft of Murray's heifer. A story explaining the origins of the sash presently held by the Benalla Historical Society. Death of John Kelly. I lost my own father at 12 years of age, and I know what it's like to be raised on lies and silences. My dear daughter, you're presently too young to understand a word I write, but this history's for you, and will contain no single lie. May I burn in hell if I speak false. God willing, I shall live to see you read these words, to witness your astonishment and see your dark eyes widen and your jaw drop, when you finally comprehend the injustice we poor Irish suffered in this present age. How queer and foreign it must seem to you, and all the coarse words and cruelty which I now relate are far away in ancient time. Your grandfather were a quiet and secret man. He'd been ripped from his home in Tipperary and transported to the prisons of Van Diemen's Land. I don't know what was done to him. He never spoke of it. When they'd finished with their tortures, they set him free, and he crossed the sea to the colony of Victoria. He were by this time 30 years of age, red-headed and freckled, with eyes always slitted against the sun. My da had sworn an oath to evermore avoid the attentions of the law. So when he saw the streets of Melbourne was crawling with policemen worse than flies, he walked 28 mile to the township of Donnybrook, and then, or soon after, he seen my mother. Ellen Quinn were 18 year old. She were dark-haired and slender, the prettiest figure on a horse he ever saw. But your grandma was like a snare laid out by God for Red Kelly. She were a Quinn, and the police would never leave the Quinns alone. My first memory is of mother breaking eggs into a bowl and crying that Jimmy Quinn, my 15-year-old uncle, were arrested by the traps. I don't know where my daddy were that day, nor my older sister, Annie. I were 3 years old. While my mother cried, I scraped the sweet yellow batter onto a spoon and ate it. The roof were leaking above the camp oven, each drop hissing as it hit. My mother tipped the cake onto the muslin cloth and knotted it. Your Aunt Maggie were a baby, so my mother wrapped her also. Then she carried both cake and baby out into the rain. I had no choice but follow up the hill. How could I forget them puddles the colour of mustard, the rain like needles in my eyes? We arrived at the Beveridge police camp, drenched to the bone, and doubtless stank of poverty, a strong odour about us like wet dogs, and for this, or other reasons, we was excluded from the sergeant's room. I remember sitting with my chilblain hands wedged beneath the door. I could feel the lovely warmth of the fire on my fingertips. Yet when we was finally permitted entry, all my attention were taken not by the blazing fire, but by a huge red-jowled creature, the Englishman who sat behind the desk. I knew not his name, only that he were the most powerful man I ever saw, and he might destroy my mother if he so desired. "Approach," says he, as if he were an altar. My mother approached, and I hurried beside her. She told the Englishman she'd baked a cake for his prisoner Quinn, and had been most obliged to deliver it, because her husband was absent, and she had butter to churn and pigs to feed. "No cake shall go to the prisoner," said the trap. I could smell his foreign, spicy smell. He had a handlebar moustache, and his scalp was shining through his hair. Said he, "No cake shall go to the prisoner without me inspecting it first." And he waved his big, soft, white hand thus, indicating my mother should place her basket on his desk. He untied the muslin, his fingernails so clean they looked like they was washed in lye. And to this day I can see them livid instruments as they broke my mother's cake apart. 'Tis not poverty I hate the most, nor the eternal grovelling, but the insults which grow on it, which not even leeches can cure. I will lay a quid that you've already been told the story of how your grandma won her case in court against Bill Frost, and then led wild gallops up and down the main street of Benalla. You'll know she were never a coward, but on this occasion she understood she must hold her tongue. And so she wrapped the warm crumbs in the cloth and walked out into the rain. I cried out to her, but she didn't hear, so I followed her skirts across the muddy yard. At first I thought it an outhouse on whose door I found her hammering. It come as a shock to realise my young uncle were locked inside. For the great offence of duffing a bullock with cancer of the eye, he were interred in this earth-floored slab hut, which could not have measured more than 6 foot by 6 foot. And here my mother were forced to kneel in the mud and push the broken cake under the door. The gap very narrow, perhaps 2 inches, not sufficient for the purpose. She cried, "God help us, Jimmy! What did we ever do to them that they should torture us like this?" My mother never wept, but weep she did, and I rushed and clung to her and kissed her, but still she couldn't feel I was there. Tears poured down her handsome face as she forced the muddy mess of cake and muslin underneath the door. She cried, "I'd kill the bastards if I were a man, God help me." She used many rough expressions. I will not write them here. It were F this and S that, and she'd blow their adjectival brains out. These was frightening sentiments for a boy to hear his mama speak. But I didn't know how set she were until 2 nights later, when my father returned home and she said the exact same things again to him. "You don't know what you're talking about," said he. "You're a coward," she cried. I blocked my ears and buried my face into my flour sack pillow. But she wouldn't give up, neither would my father turn against the law. I wish I'd known my parents when they truly loved each other. You'll see in time your grandfather were a man of secrets, and what he said and done was different things. Though for now it's enough to know my mother had one idea about my father, and the police the opposite. She thought him Michael Meek. They knew him as a graduate of Van Diemen's Land and a criminal by birth and trade and marriage. They was constantly examining the brands on our stock, or sifting through our flour for signs of larceny. But they never found nothing, except mouse manure. They must have had a mighty craving for the taste. Nor was your grandmother as unfriendly towards the police as you'd expect if solely instructed by her testimony. She might have wished to murder them, but wouldn't mind a little drink and joke before she done the deed. There was one sergeant, his name O'Neill. My mother seemed to like him better than the rest. I'm talking now of a later time. I must have been 9 years of age, for our sister Kate had just been born. Our father were away contracting, and our small